Hey folks, it's the Poor Sports Seattle podcast, and today we got a lot to talk about. First off, didn't do an episode last week. I actually recorded it 2 times, and it did not meet the strict quality standards of the Poor Sports Seattle podcast, which is to say, if you've listened, any loyal listeners will know we'll let a lot of shit get through the cracks. So they just weren't good. They just weren't good episodes. I didn't want to put them out. I spent a decent amount of time talking about what the Mariners, like a Mariners trade target, like summary. And frankly, it was the same thing I'd already said. The Baltimore Orioles are the only team that makes sense right now. And they have a bunch of players, by the way, like they have a bunch of guys on 1-year deals that you could make an old school deadline deal. And if you were going to trade a guy like Harry Ford, I want fucking all of them. Give me all of them. Is this mic too hot? Let me check that real quick while we sit here. Let's figure that out in real time. That's when you want to do it, is in real time. I did have a really cool experience last week. I did a podcast with Danny O'Neill. The most recent episode of this podcast is with Danny O'Neill. We talked about the Ryan Roland Smith situation, and we also talked about his and my mutual admiration for the career and work of Dave Sims, former Mariners announcer turned Yankees announcer, a guy that I've liked a lot and a guy who came under a lot of scrutiny. And I got word on Friday. I was at my daughter's field trip that Dave Sims wanted my phone number to talk about the podcast. Danny O'Neill asked me if he could give my phone number to him. And he did, and Dave Sims left a voicemail on my phone, which was pretty cool. Very complimentary. Listened to the podcast. Appreciated the nice things we said about him. And I stand by, like, I think Dave Sims is one of the unheralded great broadcasters in American history, frankly. Then I got another call. That was like a voicemail, and then I sent him a voicemail, and there was like a little phone tag element happening. And I didn't know if I would ever hear from Dave Sims again, and that would have been fine if I had not. I also considered sharing the voicemail with everybody, but Dave Sims is in his 70s, and because he's in his 70s, he said his phone number on the voicemail, I think 3 or 4 times. So anyways, the next time he called, I answered, and it was great. We talked for a minute, talked about comedy, talked about his time in New York and how it's going and all that. It was really fun. Maybe I'll bug him to be on the podcast in the off season. I'm not going to bother him during the season, but really fun time talking to Dave Sims, and surreal for me to have a podcast that was just me basically appreciating a guy who spent a lot of time in Seattle, and a guy that I really enjoyed, and a guy that I think had got an unfair rap. Having that guy call me was like pretty surreal. So real quickly, I got to check a text because I got a text from a comedy club owner, and I suspect it is low ticket sales. Well, my oh my, it is. It is. June 22nd, Tacoma Comedy Club. Please come out to that. Send me a message, by the way. One of the things I wanted to talk about today is I saw Bryson Dechambeau post a thing about Live. Basically, you can get buy one, get one free tickets for Live. This is a comedy club tactic. And what I'm telling you, send me a DM with the promo code, or just send me a DM that says Bryson, and I will get you in for free. Send me a DM that says Live. Send me a DM that says Dallas, which is where he's giving you buy one get one free tickets, and I will get you in for free. Anyway, yeah, he has a very funny, if you go to Bryson. And by the way, I don't know what to feel about Liv these days. I've always liked Bryson, and that's political affiliations aside. I don't know what to think about. I don't care if my athletes like a specific president, frankly. And I care less about it now than I ever have. And that includes the Democrats and the Republicans. I just can't care anymore. And I also realize, like, these dudes are golfers from the South. What do we expect? The congressional baseball game happened last week. It was televised. I watched some highlights. The Republicans won. Yeah, of course. Nobody's playing baseball in the northern states. anymore. I mean, they are, but it's not like, yeah, baseball's a very conservative sport. Of course they won. I don't know why I'm derailing this to that. What a stupid. Did you guys watch the U.S. Open this weekend? And by the way, I'm asking this. It's pre-recorded show. Is it pre-recorded so that I can give you the editing that you deserve? Absolutely not. Is it pre-recorded so that I might be able to catch the algorithm at a more favorable time? Yes. Because I have a time between 2 and 3 p.m. Pacific to record this, and I don't think that's doing anyone any good to have an episode come out at that time. So we'll see what we end up doing in the future. But anyway, U.S. Open was pretty cool. JJ Spawn won. It was interesting to watch because all weekend there had been this conversation about how the course was so hard, and coming into the final day, there was only 4 players under par, which is abnormal. And an interesting thing happened on the final day, which is the weather got really bad partway through the day, and so all the guys who finished before the storm hit Pennsylvania, it was like Pittsburgh area, all the guys who finished before then had this kind of advantage, which was they couldn't make any more bogeys. And all of a sudden, the course was playing way longer because drives were going shorter and they weren't getting any rollout, and lies were worse and wind was worse and all this stuff. And at a point, there was like a kind of interesting storyline bubbling. John Rahm had been in the clubhouse for a long time and had a good final day and was 4 over. And the leaderboard just kept falling and falling and falling to John Rahm. It never made it there. What did Spawn end up shooting? Which JJ Spawn, I will say, this is JJ Spawn looks like a Mexican Filipino version of my buddy Ron Hirschberg. No, he's 34. I was talking to my mom about how old he was because it was on during Father's Day. Well, what did his score end up being? He ended up under par. Okay, so one player under par for the whole tournament was JJ Spawn, who was having like not great luck on the final round anyway. And a guy whose story is interesting. I'm not like a pro golf historian, but a guy who was diagnosed type 2 diabetic and then found out he was actually type 1 diabetic and lost a bunch of weight and made this comeback to win a championship, to win a major championship, which is cool for him. I'm not going to tell you that I'm like super invested in his story, but it was a fun story for the weekend. And my wife asked me this question because the weather was bad in the second half of the final round. She's like, "Well, is that fair?" And I actually think that's a really interesting question because you are watching these guys who are visibly frustrated at the course conditions because of the weather. And it is truly not fair that the guys that played earlier played on an easier course, right? It would be like it's kind of like when the Rockies had the humidor at Coors Field, which I think they still do. It would be like if you only used that for certain hitters or for the home team or whatever, kind of, except for this is just bad luck in nature. And that's the nature of outdoor sports. It's not fair if there's swirling winds and when I'm up, they're blowing in, and when you're up, they're blowing out. That's not fair. And it made me kind of think about, do sports deserve do we deserve fairness from sports? And I did not plan on this being the transition, but so do we deserve fairness from sports? Or do we deserve a game that everyone agreed on with the knowledge that sometimes it will be less fair? Is it fair to the Tampa Bay football team, Tampa Bay Bucks made it sound like I don't know what they're called. Is it fair to Florida-based football teams that they struggle in the northern climates in the playoffs when there's snow and ice and freezing temperatures? Is it fair? No, but it's the game we all signed up for. And that's kind of the question I have as we approach I was listening to Mike Salk and Aaron Goldsmith this morning on 710 ESPN or whatever they call it now. Seattle Sports. And it has it's still on 710? I don't know. I watch it on YouTube when I watch it or when I listen. I have it on YouTube playing in the background. But I was listening to them talk, and they were talking about two things. One was the electronic strike zone in general, the idea of the electronic strike zone, so robot umps, and the box on TV. And these are two things that I've argued with my father-in-law about for years. And every time there's an update one way or another, he tells me I'm rarely paying attention to because to me, it's a no-brainer if you have the technology, which they obviously do, to have an electronic strike zone. My father-in-law will always be like, well, you're taking the human element. That's what he says. You're taking the human element out of the game. That's his argument for keeping human-called strike zones. So that would only be true, and I guess I'm just having a one-sided argument with my father-in-law while he's not here to defend himself. But the argument that I would make to his face, which we've had this discussion, and by the way, I love my father-in-law. There's no animosity here. The human element you're keeping is the human umpire's ability to fuck up and create unfair outcomes. Now, again, do we deserve fairness from sports? Has the idea of competitive sports promised us fairness? I don't think so. I don't think it's promised us fairness. Like I said, that we don't have any control over the weather. We don't have any control over, sequencing of events, or, Randy Johnson hits a pigeon fly. I mean, it's obviously in spring training, but there's so many elements that are out of humans' control that I don't think sports have promised us fairness. Also, by the way, it's really unfair that Randy Johnson was 6'10", left-handed, and had enormous hands, and I had to be 5'10" and 3/4, and have, average-ish sized hands and short arms and not the ability to throw 98 miles an hour. That's unfair. I had a good curveball. I had potential. Give me some bigger hands and a taller body and longer arms. Who knows what I can do? It's not all fair. But what I do think is, so the other thing they were talking about, Mike Salk and Aaron Goldsmith, is taking the box off of the broadcast so that the fans at home cannot see objectively what the strike zone is. And first off, I think it would be an enormous mistake to remove the box. Apparently, this is what they said, and I've done no research on it. There's a chance that taking the box off the broadcast is the compromise that will be needed to be made, or as part of the compromise to get the ball strike challenging system in next year. And if that's true, I would rather just keep the box and let these umpires keep being shown for the movement of electronic strike zone, which is, to me, noble, no-brainer movement for baseball. I would rather not have the challenging system and have these umpires held accountable on every pitch, to the degree that they can be held accountable on every pitch. And wait. Let the fans be pissed. Let the fans continue to see stats from ump scorecards and stuff like that show that the umpires are affecting the game, sometimes a run or more, an expected run or more, because of the counts that they're creating with bad calls. But to me, all this kicking and screaming and clawing to stop Major League Baseball from implementing an electronic strike zone and to preserve this false sense of charm that, like, a guy making a bad call because a guy has consistently tricked him into calling the ball further and further outside throughout the game because he's able to hit his spots, and there's some either unwritten or mental association with hitting your spot off the plate and that control should be rewarded. as opposed to a batter has a strike zone that he knows, or a pitcher has a strike zone that he knows, and hitting that spot gets rewarded accurately all the time, or such a high percentage of the time compared to now, is, to me, it's the equivalent to me would be, so the football equivalent, doing that from taking that box off of the broadcast, the football equivalent that's so obvious is taking the first down marker away, because those guys get scrutinized on their spot, and they get scrutinized on their respots and how it relates to the first down line, and we have all this controversy around first downs. And if you take the line away, certainly fans would bitch about it less. It's not like they would go away completely. And especially, by the way, one of the ambiguities of baseball that doesn't exist in other sports is when you're looking at a pitch in a strike zone, in some ballparks, the angle of the camera is different. Tampa Bay, it's like directly over the pitcher. So you can see over the pitcher's head to the strike zone. And maybe there's a height limit. Maybe you can't have an 8-foot pitcher, but you get a straight-on view of the pitch in the strike zone, no matter what hand the pitcher's throwing from or throwing with. At T-Mobile Park and a lot of ballparks, especially older ballparks and not domes, it's offset to the right-hand side. So what it does is it gives you kind of an offset view of where the strike zone is. It makes, I think it gives you, I think, and I'm trying to do the geometry in my head, but I think that it makes outside pitches look more outside, and so right-hander against a right-hander, I believe it makes outside pitches look more inside pitches look more over the plate. And also, I believe it exaggerates the break on in-breaking pitches from left-handed pitchers because they have more motion across the screen. I think all that's correct. So it makes Randy Johnson's slider, which, by the way, was extremely dominant, but it makes that pitch look like it's moving even a little bit more because of the angle. And it also makes, Greg Maddox's pitch that's coming back onto the plate, the backdoor fastball, this two-seam fastball that moved back onto the plate, makes that look like it's moving so much more, that kind of stuff is cool for baseball. It's fun to see the ball move around, but it also, it gives fans at home a skewed view where that rectangle strike zone gives fans a more objective yay or nay, was that a strike or not? If the question is the strike zone, so the football equivalent is the first down line. The basketball equivalent, in my opinion, it would be like saying, we're going to take the hoop away. We don't want the fans to see the hoop. The players know roughly where the hoop should be. We don't want the fans to see where the hoop is, though. And if a guy shoots, we're going to let a guy decide, was it a shot, or was it a score? Was it not a score? Maybe he's been really close the whole game, so we'll give him a score. We'll expand the size of the invisible hoop. It's complete lunacy to me that if we have a tool to objectively call this thing that is iterated 250 times a game or more, then we wouldn't use that tool. Why would you choose not to have a basketball hoop? Why would you choose not to have the first down line? Why? There's no good reason. The only good reason is to be able to trick your and to take the marker away from the broadcast, to take the box away from the broadcast, is the baseball equivalent of when your country is in crisis and they shut down the internet so nobody can do or know anything. This might be happening in the world right now, by the way. I'm not sure. We're obviously in a tumultuous time in the world right now, but it's to force the fans of your sport to live without information you've been giving them for years, so that you can obscure the reality that umpires are fucking up 7% of the time, or whatever the average is one, it's infantilizing. It's infantilizing of your fan base. It's infantilizing of the adults that pay good money to go to your games, to get their cable subscriptions, to pay for the Root Sports app, to buy a $19 goddamn Miller Lite at your stadium. Like, it's infantilizing of all those people. And it's completely, why are we protecting the umpires and not the players? Like, I mean, and to a degree they protect the players. But they don't protect the players from scrutiny. They don't, I mean, even like StatCast stats are out. We know the sprint speed of every player. We know the bat speed of every player. We know average launch angle and spin rates and so much stuff that we didn't used to know. And it's made the game richer for a lot of people. And by the way, even the people that say that they hate analytics, fucking don't consume them then. That's fine. But to take this thing because you're scared of how your fan base is responding to these bad calls made by umpires, as opposed to taking that as a sign as maybe you don't let Angel Hernandez be an umpire for 25 years. Or what was the other guy? Was it? Oh, man. I just saw there's a YouTube video of Armando Galarraga. Is that his name? And Jim Joyce, who messed up that call. I mean, just these umpires, like, you gotta hold these guys accountable then. And if you're not going to, take the guesswork, take it out of their hands. By the way, I'm not advocating for fewer umpires. I kind of think the guy that's behind the plate, if he's not calling balls and strikes, maybe is putting himself at unnecessary risk of getting hit by the ball, of being concussed. But let that guy be somewhere else in the stadium. Let him be the guy calling balls and strikes. And I also think, by the way, and I've got this feeling about a lot of sports, but every scoring play should be reviewed in baseball, just like in football. And I'm fine with some, like, spirit of the rule things. Like, the idea when replay came in, what's happened a lot is the illusion of a player coming into contact with the base and then remaining in contact the entire time throughout a somewhat violent slide. When you put it in 120 frames per second 4K, we've been able to see that sometimes those guys come off the bag. It's not the spirit of the rule. The spirit of the rule is not to allow, the spirit of the challenge is to correct egregious errors and not to find the place where there's a millimeter of space between a guy's shoe in the bag or his hand in the bag and a tag is being applied in that moment. That's not the spirit. So I'm fine with the, like, this person is considered on the bag in the immediate time following them making contact with the bag. I'm fine with an exception there. But with the strike zone, it's just something that happens so much. There's so many iterations of it a game that it seemed, and to take the box away to me would be just so insulting. You think I can't handle the information that your umpires suck? Or do you think that you think that fans are so stupid? You want to make this game, and also, here's another thing. The NFL has gotten huge in the post-Madden era. Now, some of it's gambling, some of it's whatever, but it's also, Madden opened the game of football, the strategy behind the game of football, up to a bunch of people who never had the size, speed, or mom who would let him play football competitively to get that strategy through experience. And we see the first down line on Madden. On MLB The Show, you see the box. You're pitching for the box. You want to drive in the concept of the strike zone? Show me the goddamn strike zone. But you also think your fans are so stupid that if you take the strike zone away, that they're just suddenly not going to care at all about close pitches? No, it's going to be less objective and they're going to be even angrier, is my guess. I don't think it's going to solve a thing. In fact, I think it'll exacerbate it. You think strike zone arguments didn't exist before the box was on the screen? No, that's so stupid. In fact, umpires have gotten better. I believe statistically they've gotten significantly better since the box got on the screen, which is great. That's great news. Why would you not want to keep trending in that direction? I'm sure the umpires have a union and there's a whole thing behind it, but from the fans' perspective, Does anyone else not like the box besides my father-in-law, Aaron Goldsmith, and Mike Salk? Anyway. The state of the Mariners, that's what I have written on my notes, is the state of the Mariners. The Mariners are frustrating, right? They're like barely an average pitching team. I think they're a 99 xFIP minus. And some of these guys have come to earth. I still contend you got to start looking at extensions for guys like Dylan Moore. I think you maybe even start poking around at Jorge Polanco. That was the problem I had as I went through talking through and kind of coming to the same conclusion, which is the only team that has pieces you would want as the Mariners, and that's also probably willing to trade with you because the Angels and the A's are in your division, is Baltimore. And I'm like, I want all of them. I want Cedric Tillman. I want Ryan Healy. I want Charlie Morton. I want, is it Brian? What's his name? Brian Boxer? Is that his name? Let's get to these Orioles. So I'm going to pull up the playoff odds real quick. The Orioles have a 5.2% chance of making the playoffs. This is after, of course, having a strong showing against the Mariners. Brian Baker. So, yeah, I want all these guys. I would say that, like, the argument I was making last week last week was that I don't want the Mariners to sell out, to go all in. And that I think whatever the Mariners are allowed to do should, not certainly will, but should tell us something about the future of Jerry Dipoto in Seattle. Because if I'm that ownership group and there's any chance that Jerry Dipoto is not the GM after this year, I'm not letting him go all in on this season as a lame duck GM. No way. But if I'm Jerry Dipoto and I have job security, you just built a farm system and an organization with depth from a scrap heap, a team that's been constantly just sputtering every time a decent player entered their system and made it to the bigs or close to it. They got moved, and there's finally organizational depth. And I do wonder how much different this would be if Dustin Ackley hit, or if Danny Holtzen hit, or if Jeff Clement hit. And these are like going back beyond the Dipoto years. But how much differently these teams would have looked, where they wouldn't be chasing big league talent constantly. If Alex Jackson hit, what's the first Jerry Dipoto draft? But this organization is finally in a place where they go, Ryan Bliss gets hurt, Donovan Solano's not performing, Jorge Polanco can't play second base / third base until recently. What do? Well, we have a guy. We got a great guy for this job. His name's Cole Young. We have Colton Emerson. There's organizational depth at these positions, and there's also guys, by the way, Ryan Bliss is a great example of a guy who was there because they traded a veteran for 3 rookies, and did it work out gangbusters? No, but would you rather have, this is probably actually not a great question. I was going to say, would you rather have Paul Sewald, or what's Paul Sewald up to these days? But my point is like that trade has, I believe that was Rojas, Canzone, and Bliss, and you're like, these guys are playing meaningful. So Sewald's in Cleveland. Ooh, Sewald's an interesting. So Paul Sewald, 11.5 strikeouts per 9, 1.5 walks per 9 this year, 6.17 ERA on what looks like just bad luck. Just super high batting average on balls in play, super high home run rate, and he's run a higher home run rate, or he's run a higher batting average on balls in play since leaving Seattle. But yeah, that's the question. Would you rather have Paul Sewald or Ryan Bliss and Dominic Canzone at this point? And I don't think it's like obviously Sewald, especially Sewald's making $7 million. I think those other guys are making basically nothing. Also, guys like Sewald, and I mean this version of Sewald, a 35-year-old leverage reliever that's making a little bit of money and at the end of his, approaching the end of his career, these guys are available every deadline. You could trade your equivalent of Dominic Canzone, Ryan Bliss, and Josh Rojas for those guys, and the Mariners have those guys. So, I don't know. I was thinking about making... I kind of want to do it on the same episode if I do the case for and the case against Jerry Dipoto, because I would have been perfectly fine with the Mariners moving on from Dipoto after last season. And frankly, I'm not there's no part of me that thinks that he has certainly earned a shot for next year. But I think that if they're going to let him, if they're going to force him to go through this process without spending any money, I do kind of feel and that's not spending any money. I'm not saying they don't spend any money, but without spending significantly in free agency, I kind of think it makes sense to let him see the prospects through to the big leagues and to see these guys, see what they can become and see what kind of organization he can build. I kind of think that. I'm not all the way there. Like I said, I would not, a part of me would just be excited with a new GM in town, but I think that the way he has built this team has been, it's been too slow and it's not always been great, and he's made real significant fuck-ups, and I think he's a fake analytics guy, but their amateur scouting has been very good, and that's led to a team that's got a very strong young core that maybe they're not all going to hit. And it's with any team, you can look at their past top prospects and you can go, well, that guy didn't hit. You could have traded him. You don't know who's going to be the guy that hit. You don't know who's going to be the Derek Lowe and Jason Varitek. And if the Mariners won a World Series in, I think it was 94, is that when they traded for Heathcliff Slocum? Maybe it was 95. Heathcliff, I think it was 95. Oh, 97. Is that right? Yeah, I knew it was a playoff push. So, if the Mariners have won the World Series in 1997, no one gives a shit about Derek Lowe and Jason Varitek. But the Mariners aren't going to win the World Series this year. Probably not. According to Fangraph's playoff odds, they have a sub 4% chance. According to my playoff odds and my pessimism, they have a 0% chance. Which is not true, but the chances the Mariners are going to win a World Series this year are really low. And the chances they're going to win a World Series, in my opinion, the chances they're going to win a World Series in the next 10 years goes down if you sell hard or buy hard. If you sell all of your top prospects to try to make a run in a year when you have a mediocre team. That's what they are, by the way, as a mediocre team overall when it's all said and done. It's hard to argue that they're a mediocre team. They have some great players, but overall, that's a mediocre team. And if you sell out that hard, I think your chances get worse. Last thing I want to talk about is just, I guess it's time to start bracing ourselves for an Oklahoma City championship, because the first 4 games of the series, and especially Indiana going up 2-1, and they had a significant lead in game 4. They played tonight, right? Yeah. In fact, as you're watching this, the game is probably going on, if you're watching it when it came out, or it's over, and you know the outcome. But it felt more realistic that the Pacers could hold on. They had staked themselves to the 1-0 lead, and then they stole game one, and then they they've never been convincing in any part of this, right? Like the game 2 win was convincing, the game 1 or the game 3 win was not super convincing, and then this game is, I don't know how to deal with that emotionally. The only thing that could solve it, frankly, and we might get this news, and I don't know what, I mean, Seattle is, the only thing we'll riot for is a political cause here, but like, and the other thing, by the way, is we're out of leverage. Like you can't go like, fuck you, we'll never care about you, NBA, for the 15th time if they reject Seattle for expansion. But the only way, I mean, these fucking Oklahoma City front office and ownership should be fighting for Seattle to get a spot, in my opinion. But I guess if they break the supposed curse, maybe they're a little bit less motivated. But yeah, this is bound to be, for a Sonics fan, for a Seattle sports fan, this series and this next 4 months is going to be such an emotional roller coaster as we go through the process of understanding when and how a team is going to come to Seattle, and are they going to cost $2 billion? And if they cost $2 billion, it really takes out of contention the kind of guy. So like Mark Cuban has sold his controlling stake in the Mavericks. I think he's actually sold 100% of his shares in the Mavericks now. And he's trying to buy minority stakes in a bunch of different sports. He's with a group that's trying to do that. If you're a sports fan, you want a Mark Cuban. Mark Cuban is outspoken and sometimes becomes the story. As much as we give shit to Jerry Jones, you want a Jerry Jones. You want a guy who is shamelessly devoted to winning and does not give a shit what the media thinks. Now, do you want someone who's a little more strategic than Jerry Jones? Absolutely. Do you want someone that's a little more strategic than the late Al Davis? Absolutely. But if you're a sports fan, what you want is a benevolent psychopath on your side as a sports owner. And what the Mariners have now are just a bunch of fucking calculators. And what the Sonics are very likely to have is a private equity group that's trying to turn a profit on an annual basis, which is not really how sports work, by the way, but like I'm a little bit worried that what we had the chance with Chris Hansen. I think Chris Hansen could have been that guy. And now the value of franchises has been driven up, and not by the way, like not without the help of Seattle and Chris Hansen to make the threat of a team moving real. But I don't know. It's just going to be tough, and it will be the real torture will be if Oklahoma City wins and the Sonics have not yet been announced. That's going to be brutal. All right. I don't have anything more to say. Casey McLean Comedy everywhere. Listen to my other podcast, the Unseasoned Podcast. Come see me June 22nd at Tacoma Comedy Club if the show happens, because we are at very low ticket sales. All right. Thanks, all. I will talk to you. Maybe I'll get an interview and talk to you later in the week. Bye.